Is the cycling industry truly in chaos? I would say so. Yeah, listening to the Shimano, the Trek, the Specializes, and the Giants and the Ponds out there, yeah, they're actually reporting some not so great numbers. And there's only a few that are reporting some decent numbers that are actually reporting. And in addition to conversation I had with John Bradley, some industry insights there. Yeah, absolutely. We're probably, as he coined it, we're in chaos or leading into it. We're at a, I would say, crossroads that we've never kind of ventured through before of combinations of different things. Yes, we've had high and lows, recessions and everything elsewise in the last 3 or 4 or 5 decades, but looking at today, it's different and definitely different. And looking at the latest article from Bicycle Retailer, well, this particular one is in the print form, so I didn't see it actually in internet world on their website. But on the print form, it actually features independent bike dealers and their perspective of what's happened and what they're reporting, what's currently reporting on the first half of the year, January through July of 2024 compared to 2023. Not so great for everything, but let's take a look at the survey and review, and also my personal opinion about coming from a small bike shop like Parker Bikes to currently what I'm doing now as I know I got bicycles. Well, here we go. As the wheel turns, so the days arrive after this. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with a guy. Hi, I'm Justin the Guy. Obviously I have a garage shop. Take scary out of used, one bike at a time. If you want to be kept up to date on latest projects and topics, please like and subscribe. So this little magazine came out once a month, or still does come out once a month. This is Bicycle Retailer and Industry News. This has been on kitchen tables and bike shops for the last three and a half decades. It is basically our source of figuring out what's going on in the state of actually corporations, product companies, and all of those kinds of perspectives within the bicycling retail lens. Well, yes, they have a website now and they feature articles there, which is a great resource. But one of the articles on here was not featured, or I didn't find it on the actual website. And that was basically retailers say the first half on the decline. And this is interesting because it's actually based off of retailers' perspective, not Trek, Specialized, Shimano, Ponds perspective. They're going to have some talking heads, as you heard before, from like John Burke to CEO of Specialized to everybody else in between. Well, this is interesting because some of these names on this have been I've actually worked with. I actually know these companies, and they are great individuals, and they have great stores, and they have different parts of the markets across the United States. So this is kind of a great little bit of insight. Well, starting off right off the bat, 63% are suffering 15% downturn in the first half from 2023. That's pretty huge. You're talking about 2/3 of the cycling industry, independent bike shops, are suffering the first half. And the rest of them, well, they have the flip side. They're up 11%, not just status quo. So, well, what does that mean? Depends on the market, depends on the bike shop. What are they doing? Are they fast enough to leverage different opportunities in their stores? Could be a lot of those things, but this particular survey also asked about the concerns. The concerns, are they really nervous about the market and where it's going? 45% said yes, compared to last year, which was less percentage. And the last year's percentage that felt pretty confident or going into it, that has decreased as well. So looking at those particular bullet points, we are not doing great. Bike shop owners are not too comfortable. A few of them are doing well, which is great for them. It depends on if they leverage or change their business practices and so forth. If you're one of those shops that are doing pretty well, put some comments below. Join the community and say, hey, we found this to work out a little bit better for us in our current state from doing this. I'll do my own insights as well during this video. But this particular article, they hit upon 17 different questions, but 3 actually bubble up to be the most popular ones. We'll review those individually starting now. First one is profit margin. Okay, there's a couple shops that chimed, though they actually put it in the article here. I'm sure there's several other ones, but profit margin. Profit margin is huge. Let's get a little back text on this. Like, profit margin basically drives the business. If you're not super busy savvy, that's where you buy something for X amount, you sell it for an X amount, and that percentage amount is what you basically do all your running costs of business, insurance, pay your employees, and eventually, hopefully, at the end of the day, be able to pay yourself. Yeah, that's a big number. As in weighted. The number itself has been shrinking over the last few decades. Well, let's put this in perspective. The Parker Bikes days. Parker Bikes, we had, I would say, about 35 to 45% margin. And granted, we didn't do a higher volume like they do today, and there's not as many products and SKUs and all that. That was a pretty decent sized number. Well, that's where you circumference your business licensing, rent, your electricity, your staff, and then eventually paying yourself. So that was a bigger percentage, even though it wasn't a higher volume. Well, looking at other shops in that particular period in the 90s when they had like 10, 15 stores like Bicycle Village or Wheat Ridge that had a bigger location, that margin was huge. Well, as I've been learning and watching as myself as an inventory manager and working with shops across the nation with Retail Toolkit, that margin's been shrinking already over the years. So margin is something that's very volatile because if you lose a percentage or point or two, you can be done. Toast. Because you may not be able to hit all those marks and be able to pay yourself, your employees, your business. All those things are just at a decline. And that is one of the biggest things that a bike shop or most retails really focus on. Well, one of the shops is Bike Mart. Woody Smith is one of the owners of Bike Mart, if not the owner. I talked to him over a couple times over the years. Really nice guy. They have a great shop. They have a couple locations in Dallas-Fort Worth area. They've been serving the community for multiple decades, and they've really built up a clientele and services. Well, you're looking at Dallas-Fort Worth area. Yeah, they don't have mountains and so forth, but it's a bigger window of, I would say, a season for them. So they can actually really leverage that for selling bikes. Like here in Colorado, when it snows, we're done. And when the snow melts, we eventually get our season back. So it all depends on the seasonality of the location. That has a bigger window, and also they have a lot more sales related to that. They're also a Trek specialized in a multiple brand store. So they're big enough to be able to tell those other brands that we're just going to order what we want to order, that's it. And still get those discounted volume marks that a lot of shops do. That's another thing about margin I need to emphasize. A small shop like Parker Bikes, we were like a level 2, maybe a level 3. Sometimes, depending how much we bought, we got a more of a discount than we got like free freight. When you get to those bigger volumes, you know they get a deeper discount. So therefore, they have more of a profit margin. So unfortunately, that leverages the smaller guy to work harder to make less. Well, in any case, they have a lot of brands, and they actually, out of COVID, a lot of shops have brought in a lot of brands because they had to, because they just needed inventory. Well, here's the shakedown, right? So they're going to start working with these companies to kind of reduce their actual SKU counts they've got to bring in from all these and still maintain a win-win situation. Well, also Woody mentioned that there's Trek corporate stores in his area where they had 10 and they actually closed 3 of them. Well, that tells you right there the margins are not supporting those 3 stores, and Trek has realized that they got in too deep. Trek has their own margin level. I mean, for their stores. Of course, they're kind of treating it like a retail, but honestly, they're not playing the same game. Different game for them because they are at the level 100, and they get the best deal to their stores. If they can't maintain their locations with the best margins, there's a couple things that may be wrong. Either their business model is crap for that particular area, which could very well be because big chains sometimes can't manipulate and change. I mean, they're too cookie cutter. And then in addition to, well, maybe that buy of those locations was not the greatest, or the brand themselves is not the strongest in that location, or they've actually bled themselves out too much. They're actually too much. Yeah, they're throwing stores right across the street from their independent bike dealers. Shields, for example, one of their biggest dealers that they have selling to in Colorado here, they have a Trek store that's across the street from an acquisition when they bought from Lee Cyclery. Okay, long story there. You can see that video in one of my libraries. But in any case, thinking about it, they switched locations. They decided to close that one because of basically rent was too expensive and moved across the street. Well, across the street's not too far, too close, and they're dying. I mean, that was a super stupid move. And that was just a year ago. So they already seen in the tea leaves they should have been shrinking down, but they were still proceeding like they're going to be bullish. And then they got the knees cut out, which you can see where John Burke has reduced the resizing, which you can see another video of mine about that, of Trek. This is it for them. They're reducing SKUs and so forth. That's a pretty interesting insight of that one. Another one I mentioned is Gregory from Osago Cycles, Lake Osago in Oregon. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm butchering it big time. But his basically 2 cents was putting in is like, our margins have been decreasing over the years, and this just makes it even worse. Not great. Margins are key of survival of retail. So when you're looking at Trek having a hard time keeping their stores open, which they're probably going to be closing the 1 or 2 locally here, yeah, that definitely says something about our current state of the state. They don't know where they're going at all, which bicycle retailers have been in the biz for a long time. They know what they're doing. They've seen it and they've done it, and that's the pickle of it. They have to regain. So there is a glimmer of hope, though, that 30% plus-ish is still 11% up. That's a pretty good gain for the first quarter. Well, I don't know. Maybe they had a really bad first quarter last year. Like us in Colorado, put it in perspective, we had crap weather until July 1st. So that killed our first half of the sales. So that could have been definitely a good ballooning effect. But the interesting bit is, not over year to year. It's like you need to see that 3 to 5 year average to see what that margin really pertains. But 11% up, I'll take it from being a crappy year before. That helps grease the wheels to get things moving forward. All right, the next one is consumer demand. Ooh, this is a tricky one because this is where when people buying stuff, stop buying stuff, and you have too much of this stuff, ooh, that hurts as an independent bike dealer as well as the wholesalers like Trek and Specialized Direct. Looking at those, there's a couple of people that definitely chimed into this one. And yeah, it is pretty interesting to say the least. So this comes from a shop in Landry's, which is on the East Coast. I've worked with them before. Great shop, multiple locations in the Boston area. They're down about 1%, but they've actually maintained their customers and the brands. And the consumer demand, when you're looking at this for them, it's the e-bike thing is really, with government subsidies and all that, have really kind of ballooned their sales to help shift the offset of the downward trends. They are very smart. In other words, they did a proper buying basically to keep that from becoming too much of a deficit. Buying the right stuff at the right time and leveraging those basically bike companies and telling them like, no, we're not going to buy that. Small shops have a hard time with that due to the fact that the dealer agreements are usually force-fed you a whole bunch of inventory that sometimes doesn't even fit your market at all, which some companies, I'm not going to say, but they very specialize in certain particular things, and they really put a pressurize on a lot of their dealers. Yeah, they don't really understand the consumer demand. They just understand what they've ordered from Taiwan, and you need to take it in the shorts. So therefore, a company like Landry's was able to leverage them, and they are also a Trek dealer, and various others now, I believe, as well during the COVID experience. And they gained a lot of customers during COVID. So if you're able to retain and maintain those, your percentage loss is probably less, maybe. Okay, this one is from Will and Sprocket, and Noel I've worked with, and he's a super smart cat. So this is something you really got to take to heart. And I'm going to read this for word because this one is not even would give it justice if I just gave it an overview. Let's start. Biggest concerns is erosion of unit sales based on lower consumer demand. While revenues are down, the unit declines are more dramatic and obscured by higher prices, service, online business, etc. What explains the unit erosion? I think it's more than demand stuck forward. From the pandemic, we are selling fewer bikes on the same store basis than pre-pandemic. It feels like inflation, particularly housing
and basic necessities, but it puts a lot of families in uncertain financial footing, and they are holding back on discretionary purchases. This seems to be the case across consumer retail categories until there is more consumer confidence and a recalibration of household spending. This seems likely to be a soft demand will be with us for a while.
Yeah, it's really hitting home, right? I don't want to go into the soapbox of like everything else is more expensive, but the thing is definitely have not decreased. And if you're getting into this particular sport or are into a particular sport, you're going to be a little more price savvy. So when you're looking at particular Trek, Specialized, Pond, all those particular companies with their high inflated prices, no low entry level bikes or parts or accessories, therefore you're going to find opportunities for other companies to sneak right in and fulfill those customers. Also within the used market. As an independent bike dealer, they start leveraging used product, used bikes, used wrecks, whatever they can get their hands on with a lower price point to provide an actual product for that actually warrants that particular market. Well, if people are concerned about spending too much money when they're going out for dinner or to the movies and what have you, yeah, something's going to have to cut the corners because their basic incomes have not increased. And those subsidies that we've gotten or discounts or whatever during the last few years have all dried up. Unless you're looking at the e-bikes, which there's still some out there. But that means if you really want to shift, get rid of a car payment and go to a bike, that kind of thing, any case, there is a huge erosion of those particular units. And for sure, when you're looking at Wheel and Sprocket, when they have 10 locations in the Midwest, which is in Milwaukee and Chicago, yeah, they have a pretty big insight of what the barometer is. So we talked about the East Coast, talked about the South, we talked about the Midwest. What else are we going to find? Well, the cost of doing business. We're going to talk about a shop in the Seattle area. Greg's at Green Lake. They have multiple locations, like 3 or 4 of them in the Seattle metro area. They're actually up, but the problem is their actual percentage does not cover the actual salary increases they have to maintain with basically the cost of living going up. To maintain those people, you got to give them opportunities if you want to have good people on your staff. Therefore, that actually costs even more. So even though they might be up, they're still down. That's kind of a current trend with a lot of shops going across the nation when you're talking about the cost of doing business. The biggest expense of a business is actually their labor, the people working for them. Is their biggest asset too, if it's done right. But other things are kind of fixed costs to some level, even though electricity may have gone up a little bit, natural gas, rent possibly. If they own their own buildings, they can actually stabilize that with basically their percentage mortgage. But when you're looking at those particular companies that, well, I got to add people for the season and decrease people in the off season, that kinds of ebb and flows are kind of hard to maintain. Well, in Seattle, they have a consistent business pretty much year round. Not as good as San Diego per se, but pretty consistent that therefore they can keep a good portion of their staff on year round. A lot of those people ride year round too with the conditions at the end. They just got used to water and rain and all that good stuff. But in any case, talking about that, yeah, it is a big pinch. And even though you have gains, you're still at a loss, which they're saying here. So with those costs of doing business, well, what happens is even though you have an increase, you still have a decrease of your actual profit margin because of those costs of doing business. You have to cut corners. Well, looks like they're going to have to like close down locations like Trek did, close down a warehouse. Those kinds of things are going to have to be shifted and readjusted. Yeah, will they sustain? There's a good chance they'll survive, but on a smaller sense, sometimes not. Because when you're like a 2 or 3 person shop, those particular points that come across, like the margin's not up there, your customers are not coming in, you're not selling as much, and the cost of living to maintain those employees is less, those particular lines on the chart are going to cross. When that crosses, you're done. Unfortunately, you got to have a good gap and bufferage to have a little bit of margin left to pay, yeah, the owners. Well, if the owners are not getting paid, the business is not going to happen. So what is the bigger factor that's really driving everything right now? For anybody that's 11% up or not as far down as the previous years before, Well, the e-bike trend is still pumping along pretty strong. So much so that there's a lot of companies that never been in the bikes getting into them. We're going to allude to that in a couple of featured videos coming down the line. But in any case, the teaser, these guys do motorcycles, not mountain bikes, but yet they do mountain bikes, which I found out recently, which is weird. I don't know how long they've been doing, but we're going to do an interview on a couple of those at a later date. But in any case, that just gives you an example of how popular the e-bike trend has become. However you feel about it, yay, nay, or otherwise, they're there. I go for a bike ride and I see over half the people riding in my community on e-bikes. That's awesome in my perspective because it's getting those people out and riding. That's great. Yeah, there's going to be some downsides to it. Downsides like weird companies, batteries catching on fire. You've heard stories in New York of all these laws need to be passed on maintaining those things. They don't want to catch anything. Mismanagement of lithium batteries is not a good thing. So when you're looking at all that perspective, it's really hitting fast and hard. And a lot of these companies are popping up that may have never made these before, or they're using different products that probably should not be used. Well, in any case, that's what's really driving the cycling industry now, which is really kind of strange because a few years ago, a lot of people are like, nope, poo-poo caca and all of that. And now it's like the biggest leading trend of the cycling industry besides gravel, which is a little bit further back. But in any case, well, my perspective on all of this is, small bike shops, if they've been around for a long time, they know the trends. They know when they're going to have to hit the old lever, like, can't do it anymore. That's what happened to us in the early 2000s. Understandably, we had a lot of circumstances that were not related to the market, but more personal and family related. But in any case, it doesn't change the narrative that a lot of these shops are going to have those hard decisions. Cutting staff, cutting locations, revamping, switching to different industries like adding skis and snowboards or offset industries to their mix. We had to do that at Parker Bikes in the late 90s, and that did us well for several years. So therefore, the change and erosion and whatever you want to call it, got to sustain it. It's going to be one of those things you got to work for other angles to figure out where you're going to go from here. Where are we going to go from here? I'm going to tell you where I'm going from here. Okay, I was basically refurbishing road bikes, business model in 19 to 20. COVID hit, boom. And then selling the heck out of bikes. And then I tried to do service and got crushed and freaked out. And then I just tried to cut out service altogether and just worked on refurbished bikes, which worked in 21 and 22. 23 had a hard stop in the market. And then I need to do diversity and figure out how I can do service. So now, long story short, did not do service, cut it out, now doing service, and now I figured out a good, healthy balance between the two. So my customers, I love them, and I'm doing service. Not that I wanted to do that before, I did. I just didn't know how to do it without myself going insane, being the only guy in a shop, right? Figure that out, balance it. It was all about managing time. Figured out how to manage that and manage the other things that are coming in. And that saved my butt going into 24. Why? Because that's the only thing money was coming in was service. Selling bikes became flipping them or selling them within 30 days has turned out to be 100 to 120 to 140 days on sitting on that inventory. For a small guy like me, I can't sustain. I don't have the volume power of sales to support me. In that perspective, I had to have those quick turns to basically keep going. That's where service became a great injection. Also incorporated a whole bunch of new customers, in addition to a lot of you on YouTube who saw me locally and going, hey, I want this guy to work my bike, which is awesome. So in any case, working all those different perspectives has actually helped me drive my business forward. Yes, I'm 2 steps back and I'm working 1 step forward now, but hopefully within the next year or so, I'll be able to skip and go a couple steps forward again, like we did in COVID. But a little more, I would say, stable versus, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Because when a small shop like mine, we can be quick. We can change directions, do things differently, quickly, add services, take away services, whatever we need to do to sustain what's working, what's not working. Bigger shops have a little harder time because they have a bigger ship to steer. then when you look at the corporations like Trek and Specialized, Pon, and Shimano, those are big Titanics and they can't turn on a dime. So when you're looking at basically 2 or 3 quarters loss in Shimano, that's predictating what's being coming down the line, what's going to be ordered, what's going to hit the sales floor. Basically, the inventory is going to shrink up until the prices or until the demand comes back or fits appropriately to the current demand, and they're going to chug forward from there and try to increase again. Well, looking at the small guys, small shops, if they're very, very clever, they're going to be able to navigate through this and be able to be just fine. The bigger shops like, the Bike Mart or Will and Sprocket or Landry's, they're going to be fine because they've endured all these kinds of weirdness over the years, even though it's a compound, and they really do have some really smart individuals working for them to do those particular hard decisions to get the most effort forward without too much of a loss. Nothing's for sure. Nobody lasts forever. Look up Blockbuster. That's all I gotta say. And various other huge chains that just took a huge dive. And in the cycling industry, look at Performance. But those are, acquisitions that went bad or whatever the case may be, like in Kona. In any case, diverged. We're looking at, yes, we're in a knee deep of chaos and trying to figure out the directions. But a lot of the independent bike shops and the front lines have already figured out some wins. 30% of them said they had an increase. So they got some win markings there. They're actually going to leverage going forward, and then they can add some of these other things back into the mix where they had to put it on the back burner. I don't know, road bike sales, mountain bike sales, whatever, e-bike sales, whatever the case may be. That's where we're at. In any case, thanks for hanging out with me. If you got insights of your particular neck of the woods, of your shops that you go to, or you have a shop and you figured out some successes and what not to do, please comment below. I'll put some information as well in the description of what I've experienced. And here we go. Going into the off season. Ooh. Yeah, we'll see how this shakes out coming next spring. In any case, yes, I would say we're definitely in chaos, and I will review these with John Bradley with a follow-up at some point when he returns from his European trip. Oh, that'd be so nice to be on vacation. In any case, thanks for hanging out with me. If it's beautiful in your neck of the woods, please go for a ride. Until next time, have a wonderful day.